All right, here we go.
Hey y'all, it's Chastity Rosales with the Preferred Closing Specialist Team Place and Keller Williams in El Paso. Talking with my favorite VA lender today, Jason Steyer. And we're going to talk about the difference in what a concession is, closing cost, and a prepaid on a VA loan, and then to mastermind around how to be creative with our strategy and getting these paid, given that right now the times in real estate's a little bit crazy. So,
Mhm.
Jason, welcome. Tell them a little bit about
Thank you.
yourself, and let's dive into what this looks
N-
like.
No, I appreciate you having me on, and I because this topic is extremely important, and I've been in the mortgage business 20 years. All of my business is VA, and I see this topic get confused a lot. And it's a lot of it has to do sometimes with basically how our contracts are written. They just say seller concession or closing costs, but the VA is the only loan program that lumps those into two different categories. And they do that for a strategic reason, is because concessions to them, there's things that fall into concession bucket, and then there's things that are going to be under the closing cost bucket. And it's important when you're writing offers, especially in this environment that we are going into. This is a season that a lot of people haven't been into. We're going to have to get a little creative. So it's important to know what those are to be able to craft an offer uh, for your veteran to win, because now might be the time for that. And so let's talk about concessions first. Okay, a concession, as far as the VA is concerned, is anything that's added a value, and it falls into things such as you can actually, the seller can pay the funding fee on behalf of the veteran, and it can be partial or full. Doesn't have to be the whole thing.
Let me ask you something real quick and back you up so we have an understanding of this in our head when we're thinking about these costs.
Yep.
So each loan has a max of what a seller can contribute. On a VA loan, what percent is that?
So on the concession, it's 4% max on a seller concession, and
Okay,
then
so things
closing
like
closing
okay,
costs are unlimited.
okay, see that? Oh, okay. So I just learned something today myself, even after I thought I was a VA loan specialist, because
Yeah,
I always said everything together, we can't get more than 4%. So we actually can milk this thing out pretty well.
yeah. So on the consent, like FHA is 6%, right? Conventional is typically 3, unless you're putting over 10% down, and it can go up to 6. But VA is the only one that's pretty variable, right? And so there's things that fall into that concession bucket under that 4%. Okay, the 4% rule that we talk about. So, for example, it's the funding fee. You can pay the funding fee on behalf of the veteran if they're not exempt. You can pay a credit card bill. Let's say that a seller wanted to pay a credit card off to eliminate the payment to allow that veteran to qualify. They can do that. That falls within that 4% bucket. Points as appropriate to the market. So typically 2 discount points. That's a very hot topic these days, obviously, with rates and things
One
like
buy
that.
down, right? Yeah.
Right? Exactly. So that's included in the concession bucket. So you could pay 2% towards a buy down, a permanent buy down, or you could pay 2% towards paying a credit card off. Or let's say the funding fee was 2.3%. You could almost get it paid for with that 4%. So being creative in that, prepaids fall into the concession bucket. Okay. So it's important to know those things. And in the VA handbook, again, it gives you some examples in chapter 8 of what some of that stuff might fall into. So, but it's important to obviously check with your loan officer, make sure because you don't want to be out writing contracts with things that don't fall into that concession bucket and run into a problem. So, but on top of that, so let's say they paid 4% in the funding fee and paying a credit card off. Well, let me back up just a second. I'm going to add this to it. So that 4%, you can even pay, let's say that veteran had a judgment, like a money judgment of some sort. The seller can pay that money judgment under the concession rule.
Is
So
there anything that they can't pay under the concession rule?
not that, as long as it doesn't straight like violate a federal law or something, a contractual type thing. The only thing that some people will tell you that you can put, appliances and things like that in that 4%, which you can do. I don't recommend doing that, because then you got to assign a dollar value to it. You got to have it appraised. It turns into a paperwork nightmare. but you can certainly do that. So as far as things that are like off limits, you're not really going to run into much.
So on the contract, so speaking of Texas, and if you're in a different state, listen to this is going to be different. But on the Texas 1-4 that we use to write most of our contracts, there is a category there for how much the seller's going to give. And we either put a dollar amount based on what you tell us or an amount of sales price. For us, we always put an amount, and we talk to Jason to say, okay, how much are closing costs? But we've only thought about closing costs in the past. So let's say they're paying all those closing costs, and we'll talk about what that is later, and they're going to give them $5,000 towards the funding fee. So does it matter that that number in that category exceeds that 4% as long as we tell you how it's going to be broken down under what category?
I think because the way, like you said, contractually from a legal perspective, especially here in Texas, you can't, manipulate contracts or do things like that. You can, if you tell me that, you tell us that verbally, we're going to put notes in there for the underwriter so she knows where we're separating all that out.
Okay.
So
awesome.
communication is key.
Yeah, that's great. So that can be under there and just.
In other states, they don't have that problem. They can write special provisions or they can do that. So again, if you're watching this, make sure you check with your state, the state contracts, because they're all going to vary, unfortunately. I wish they would get a little more in tune with that verbiage, but that's a fight for another day. So
yeah, we have special provisions category that we could put in there, but Texas is really specific on what you can write in there. So I guess you just could do it and specify it in an email. Just say, hey, this is how we're breaking this down.
Yeah.
So that is amazing.
Yeah. So if you move into the closing cost bucket, that covers everything else. It's not under the, title work, all those things. That's unlimited. There's no cap as long as it's usual and customary. So we will make that, I have seen some loan estimates from some lenders that are trying to retire on one loan. That's what it looks like. And that's not usual and customary to the market.
What's the rule for a VA loan? How much can a lender charge?
So it's 1% in origination. No, it's 1%. That's as much as the lender can charge.
I mean, right. The unless comes later. Sorry. We'll talk about when it don't apply.
Thinking about the fees. Yeah.
The fees,
but 1% either in a flat fee or broken out, itemized between like admin, processing, underwriting, things like that equal 1%. But I've seen some things where you're like, okay, you can't charge somebody a $5,000 underwriting fee. You can't do that. Right. We know as an industry standard, that is way over the top. So we're going to call that out. And the underwriter at that lender should hopefully do the same. If not, the VA is going to find it and then they're going to get in trouble. So, mama's always watching. Trust me, they're auditing things, especially nowadays with everybody, being a little bit more in tune with what that looks like. So closing costs or everything else is not under the prepaid category. And, for example, I have had deals where the seller paid like 3.5% in a buy down.
But that falls under
3%, right? Falls into the concession category. Okay. And then 1.5% would be under closing costs.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how it is a little bit tricky when it comes to that. But again, having the right people who know that and be able to help you guys write offers and craft offers in this environment, you can win with that. And a lot of veterans can win because they can pay off debt or be able to qualify when they might not otherwise be able to do so.
That's awesome. What else falls under closing costs? You said the lender fees, like
lender
title
fees, title policy, everything on the title side, and anything, inspections, things like that, all fall under appraisal. All falls into the credit reports. If the lender charges a tax service fee, things like that, all fall under that closing cost category. So it's different than any other loan type. No other loan type separates that, but there's closing costs and prepaids. Obviously, have prepaid interest and taxes and insurance, but nobody breaks it out in a concession and a closing cost. So it's a little different. A lot of people get tripped up on it.
So those caps apply to almost everything. So that really could eat up just the closing costs and prepaids alone could eat up that.
I mean, think about new construction today. Builders. Their tune's a little different nowadays, right?
Oh yeah, right now they're like, oh, here's 10,000 towards whatever they want to use.
We love you.
I'm like, well, they can't even use 10,000 in my head, but now I'm like, wait a minute, we don't use all 10,000 of that, and this is how boom, 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 this pot, this pot, this pot. Yeah. You get a pot, you get a pot, you get a pot.
It's like Oprah, right? So
Yes.
if they're going to pay, I've seen some $15,000-$20,000 concessions for builders.
Yes.
So you could take
Pay
10,
all my credit cards off.
especially going into the holiday season, so be thinking about how to get creative with builders and paying funding fees if it's, especially subsequent use, right? If you've got a $350,000 purchase price and a 3.6% funding fee, that's 10 grand. So you could literally spend 10 grand, not roll it in and not have to worry about your equity being eaten if you were to get orders quick, right? So you're making an investment and being smart with the money, but you have to know the rules in order to do it.
Switching back to under the concessions before we move on to prepaids and wrap this up. The lender, let's just remind them on that lender fee, because a lot of times what we battle is they don't want to take a VA loan because sellers must pay some of these fees.
Yep.
So let's separate out for them the difference in what they can and can't pay, that if they have a lender fee or not, because that dictates some of that.
Yeah. So the rule is that 1%, right? That's that 1% rule for origination fees and everything that falls in the origination bucket. So if your lender charges a 1% origination fee, whether collective or in a flat fee, it triggers those non-allowables that are in Chapter 8 of the handbook. And, attorney fees, things of that nature won't be able to be paid.
You're breaking up, like you're breaking up a little bit. You keep going in and out like a robot.
Man, typically I got to pay for that kind of voice.
I know.
If it's 1% and so it's going to trigger the non-allowables. And then once you have that, a lot of people will think that the seller has to pay them, but it doesn't mean the seller has to pay. It just means the veteran cannot. So anybody in a transaction can pay for them. And my suggestion is that if your lender's charging 1%, you make the lender pay for it because they're making enough money. That's the way I feel about it.
And then you have to be careful because they've gotten smart and they don't call it an origination fee. They just name it all these different fees and they make it add up to the 1%. And then
Correct.
I've seen them outside. So everything total the lender charges cannot surpass 1% total, or can they charge up to 1% in this and then add another jump charge on?
No, it's 1% total. So anything that would fall into that bucket after that cannot be paid by the veteran. So, obviously either one of the agents or the loan officer can pay for it. So, you just have to pay attention to that because people are getting a little tricky these days and a little crafty with the way they do things. But it's hyper important.
We're losing you again. Your internet is sketchy today.
I know. It doesn't want to work either. You can hear me now? Like the Verizon person, you can hear me now. But you have to just pay attention to what those fees look like and partner with some. Ask questions. That's the biggest thing is ask. Don't be afraid to let somebody else look at it because you never know what it looks like. I get reviewed all the time, right? I mean, that's okay. That's what we should do. It's a checks and balances system. So don't be afraid to ask questions.
And what are the non-allowables again? And what pot does that fall under?
So the non-allowables can be anything from like your attorney fee, the closing fee, commission, all that stuff. So there's a list of them. It's not all inclusive because again, people get creative with what they call things. So you just have to pay attention to what that looks like, and because there's a lot of lenders out there who will do it and just not tell you. And then you're halfway down the road, and those fees get charged, and everybody's like, "Okay, who's going to pay them?"
I think we should do our next class on reading that disclosure that the lender sends out. So
I will share some loan estimates, like visual. I'll give you some loan estimates or fee sheets to look at, so you can see identify these different fees, where they fall, what buckets they fall in. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, that loan estimate is like deciphering hieroglyphics. Most people can't even read it. Most loan officers can't even read it. It's stupid, frankly.
Yeah,
but
I don't say that so we have subject matter experts on the loan, but you should know enough that if something looks weird, in my opinion, that an agent should know enough that if something looks weird, that you can say, "Hey, wait a minute, I've never seen this kind of charge, and what is this, and why is this?" Enough that you can question to make sure your client's taken care of.
Because box A, for those list, box A on the loan estimate. So if you have one, look at it. Box A is the origination charge. That's where all your origination discount, all that's going to show up. And I have seen some that are rather egregious because people are trying to artificially keep their rates low.
Yeah.
Well,
and charge them a rate down, and they don't even know they're buying their rate down.
100%, and they don't know it, right?
Yeah.
And in this environment, to me, it's not always 90% of the time. It's not the smart play for your money because you might get a refinance in 8 months.
Exactly.
These rates are temporary, and so it's just knowing and having people in your corner, on your side, on your team to be able to help you through that. Because again, it's confusing.
Yeah.
So make sure you partner with the right people to be able to spell that out for you.
Love it. And then what's our prepaids?
So just the prepaids is your prepaid interest. So from the date you close to the end of the month, obviously taxes, property taxes that you prepay that we have to take to satisfy RESPA, homeowners insurance, same thing. Those actually fall into the closing cost buckets. So, those are pretty typical because by RESPA, we're only collecting 3 months of property taxes and insurance to pad your escrow accounts. So, but if you're 100% disabled in the state of Texas, we're not going to collect for that. Well, some
Or
lenders,
just the property tax. You will collect for the insurance. Yeah.
we're going to collect for it, but not property tax. So you got to watch out for that because some lenders don't exempt you from the day of closing. And so it can eat into certain things and make your closing costs inflated. And it's a thing. So
just to point that out, if you're watching, if you're an agent or if you're a consumer, what he's talking about is if you are 100% disabled vet in Texas, in most states, you don't pay property tax. However, the lender has the ability to still collect for that if they want, and then allow you to fight that with the city when you close. So if you are 100%, one, you need to make sure they know it. And two, you need to ask the question, hey, do you still take prepaid taxes or do you exempt me from it? If they do take it, that means they're counting it against your DTI, which means you're going to afford less house when you don't have to. Mm-hmm. And they're also going to include that in your payment. So you're going to be paying a payment for who knows how long until the city decides they're going to exempt that from you. And then the mortgage company has to return that escrow money that you've been building up. And it took one of my clients a year to do that because he wouldn't change lenders like I advised. And if they do not exempt you from that, I would strongly suggest that you switch lenders so you don't have that problem. And Jason does not take that, which is another reason I love working with him.
It's a pain. And in your state, every state does it different. I mean, most of them had the exemption, but not everybody follows from the day of closing thing. And in Oklahoma, it's different than North Carolina and Texas and on all over. So if you're an agent and you're watching this in whatever state you're in, make sure that you understand that. That's a very helpful tool for your clients because there's a lot of people who don't. Be able to guide them down that path and partner with the right people to make sure that they, their best interest is being held up, because a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah. And just to clarify, so I know we talked about 3 different pots, the concessions, the closing costs, and the prepaids, but you said prepaids really fall under the closing cost. Mm-hmm. So we really have 2 pots, but one pot has 2 different kind of things in them.
Correct. Concessions and closing costs. That's the 2 different things as far as you look in the VA guidelines. It's those 2 things.
Okay. And the 4% applies under the closing costs and prepaid category, right?
The concession. 4% is the concession max.
Okay. So unlimited
unlimited closing costs as long as they're usual and customary is the rule.
Okay. Awesome. That is amazing.
Yeah. So another great feature of VA that people get confused. And that's the greatest thing about education and videos and getting this information out, because I promise you this, there's a lot of people out there, they don't understand how that works because they've been told by their loan officer it's 6% max.
Or other people,
4%,
conceptions, reading these Facebook feeds where people post things that are totally untrue. Just keep watching videos, you all, and alert your sellers that this is a powerful loan. I think sellers lost money during COVID 100% because they were advised not to take these VA loans because of myths that were not true, and they were advised not to take them. And they don't really understand how powerful this loan is.
I 100% agree, especially in this environment. Suddenly, VA offers are good again, and they're more friendly now. And it's how that works.
They're solid. They're the ones with the jobs and getting the disability, and so they have the money to purchase. So it looks appealing.
Well, and what people I think are realizing now, especially around military institutions like Bliss and other places, that the military is transient by nature.
Yeah,
they're inflation proof, right? They're recession proof because they have to move, and they're going to buy if they're smart and aren't able to. Typically, most of them do. And so and people have memories, just remember that and make sure that you're advocating for their benefit.
Absolutely. Anything else under this category before we let you get on with your day?
I don't think so. I think that about sums it up.
Just remember, if the loan officer does not charge that 1%, and that's something you should ask when they get approved, some of those rules does not apply for what the seller can pay. So you need to understand that if they do charge the 1%, then some of those non-allowables fall somewhere. Doesn't mean that the seller has to pay it. But if the lender doesn't charge that, the buyer can pay it, right, Jason?
100%.
Okay, so that's another tip. Thank you again. Again, I'm Chastity Rosales with PCS El Paso, home of Fort Bliss, powered by Place, and I'm with Keller Williams. And Jason, our amazing VA loan officer, that is our VA boss that's always keeping us educated so we can better serve our clients. If we can help you, please let us know. If we can teach a class for your team or your market center or your brokerage, let us know. We'd love to come on and chat with you about how we work with them. We've probably closed 200 VA loans this year, most of them with Jason. And we'd love to tell you about how we do that.
100%. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Jason. What's your phone number if they need you, or your email?
If you want to get in touch with me, you can best way to text me is at 469-340-6451, or you can check me out online at valoanboss.com.
And I'm 915-873-2772 or www.pcselpaso.com. Y'all have an amazing day. Thank you for tuning in.
See y'all later.